So with the Bulls season ending early before the start of the playoffs, we were able to hear our first words from the Bulls executive vice president Arturas Karnisovas for the first time since the trade deadline in his end of season press conference. And he opened up by reading some prepared remarks, which that in and of itself seemed a little insincere. It was almost like he was just reading one of those apology statements you hear from people in court. And then he answered a number of questions from the media. And look, what I'll say is this. And I'm going to keep this short because I have family coming into town later today. This was a better press conference than I would have expected. And I know a lot of people, including a lot of media members and content creators in the Bulls community, will disagree with this, but I say it was better than expected because it was literally the first time since implementing this core from 2021 that AK admitted change needs to happen. Yes, stating this when everyone else already saw it, admitted a couple years too late when it was clear this roster had hit its peak from a long time ago, that's bad. But the reason I say this was better than expected doesn't mean that it was a good press conference by any means, and there were a lot of cringy and delusional comments, which I'll get to, but the reason it was better than expected was because I honestly believed we were going to hear more of the same lip service. Hell, I made a joke of a bingo card of all the comments we would hear from AK in this end of season press conference. $70 million on the payroll of injuries. We played really well against Atlanta. We finished 9th instead of 10th. We showed that we can beat anyone. The character of the locker room is great. We feel this is the best group to put us in the position to win. All the same things that we've heard before. I truly felt that AK was going to deflect and not take any form of accountability. I really did. But instead, he actually did take accountability. Said it's on him to build a better roster. It's on him to be better. Admitted for the first time that this group does not work. He straight up said, and I quote, "I recognize when change needs to happen, and I believe that time is now." A little behind in recognizing this is a pretty bad thing on his part, that we're just now finally accepting defeat. But for the front office, a front office that has been so stubborn and refusing to acknowledge mistakes, that was a big step to me. Now, I think the big question is, will AK actually do something about it? Because words are good and fine, but it doesn't mean anything unless you see action. Let's be real. We have heard some encouraging words from this front office in the past about what they're going to do to improve this team, and didn't really follow through on those promises. Last offseason, talking about changing their shooting profile, getting some rim protection, and they didn't do that. That shot profile remained the same, and they got smaller as a roster overall. So I won't lie that I'm a bit skeptical about true changes actually being made, but I don't know. This just seemed different to me. AK was much more defiant and adamant this time that change needs to happen. He said he can't just keep sticking with the same group and expecting different results, which, yes, Captain Obvious, something the fans have been saying all season long, but again, this is the first time he has made these types of remarks. You know, before it was, well, we're going to look at everything, which he did say again this go around multiple times, but before he refused to accept or at least acknowledge that this crew didn't work and that change needs to happen. Like, really, go back and watch some of those previous press conferences. There was no acknowledgement of not believing in this team. That, to me, is noteworthy and hopefully a step in the right direction. Now, don't get me wrong. I'd be lying to myself if I said I'd be shocked if, they ended up running this crew back for another year, because, again, words are just words until we see action. And we haven't seen action up until this point outside of some very underwhelming offseason signings. And the other part we have to consider is, hey, the front office might actually realize change needs to be made, and they want to make drastic changes, but they simply don't have the ability to do so. It's going to be very hard to trade Zach and Vucevic's contract. You've got to make a decision on DeMar DeRozan and whether to re-sign him when you know he's going to be looking to get paid based on what he brought to this team over the last 3 seasons and effectively outplayed his contract. They've got Javon Carter locked in for another 2 years after this, which some might consider that dead money. He mentioned they wanted to retain Patrick Williams, but what's the contract value amount there? They have AC going into an expiring deal. Like, realistically speaking, what concrete changes can they make to this roster with the way they've backed themselves into a corner with their cap sheet? Yeah, you can let DeMar walk or hope for a sign-and trade of some kind, but that doesn't really solve for Zach and Vucevic, who are the 2 bigger problems when you factor in their production and contract value. In order to get them off your books, you essentially have to unload assets to get rid of them, which puts them in an even worse position when you have to give up future assets that you would presumably need in the event of a rebuild. Like it's not going to be easy for the Bulls to just tear it all down and rebuild. If Zach and Vooch had some value to some contending teams, that would be one thing, but they don't at this moment. And of course, we haven't even mentioned Lonzo Ball, who, if he's healthy enough to be cleared to play, the Bulls can't just wipe his salary off the books. It's not that simple, just applying for medical retirement and getting that final year off the cap sheet. Like, he has to be deemed ineligible for them to be able to do that. And if he is able to play, or at least is deemed well enough to play basketball again at some point in the future, that's another player you're not going to be able to trade. Unless it's for salary filler purposes, because no one's going to want Lonzo Ball at this stage in his career after not playing for 2.5 seasons. So yeah, I'm skeptical that one, we should take AK at his word, but even if he is serious about making changes, that they'll actually be able to make meaningful changes given how they position this current roster and their cap sheet. But because it's the first time we've heard an admission of defeat, an admission that it's time for change and that this group doesn't work, it's the first time that we've heard those types of comments from this front office, which at least is somewhat encouraging. They didn't use injuries as an excuse. They didn't have a load of excuses for why they didn't show up the way they did and why the results have been so poor. But anyway, let me know what you guys thought of AK's comments. Let me know in the comments below. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.